Good morning. Today is Thursday, April the 15th, and today we are actually going to be again in chapter 7 of the book of Acts, and we're going to be reading verses 30 through 43. I'll give you a brief update. I talked to Marty Griffin's son, and they are taking him back for an MRI. Um, uh, just They're waiting for his body to wake up, and trying to make sure there's no problem that with his brain that could have occurred last week. So, just if you wouldn't mind just praying right now, because they were just getting ready to take him back for the MRI, and we just pray that there was no damage, and that he'll wake up soon from the induced coma. So just continue to pray for that family, and I appreciate that, and I'll keep you informed when I hear more. So that brings us to Acts chapter 7, verse 30. Again, this is still Stephen talking about the history of Israel and God's working in the history of Israel. And this is regarding Moses. He says, "And when 40 years had passed, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire in a bush in the wilderness of Mount Sinai. When Moses saw it, he marveled at the sight, and as he drew near to observe, the voice of the Lord came to him, saying, I am the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And Moses trembled and dared not look. Then the Lord said to him, Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their groaning, and have come down to deliver them. And now come, I will send you to Egypt. This Moses, whom they rejected, saying, Who made you ruler and a judge, is the one God sent to be a ruler and deliver by the hand of the angel who appeared to him in the bush. He brought them out after he had shown wonders and signs in the land of Egypt and in the Red Sea. This is that Moses who said to the children of Israel, The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from your brethren. Him you shall hear. This is he who was in the congregation in the wilderness with the angel who spoke to him on Mount Sinai, and with our fathers, the one who received the living oracles to give to us, whom our fathers would not obey, but rejected. And in their hearts they turned back to Egypt, saying to Aaron, Make us gods to go before us. As for this Moses, who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we do not know what has become of him. And they made a calf in those days, offered sacrifices to the idol, and rejoiced in the works of their own hands. Then God turned and gave them up to worship the hosts of heaven. As it is written in the book of the prophets, Did you offer me slaughtered animals and sacrifices during 40 years in the wilderness, O house of Israel? You also took up the tabernacle of Moloch and the star of your god Remphan, images which you made to worship, and I will carry you away beyond Babylon. So he's rehashing the history of the nation of Israel, reminding them that God sent Moses. God sent him to deliver them. He delivered them out of bondage in Egypt, and yet how quickly they returned to the idols of Egypt. As soon as Moses went up for 40 days on Mount Sinai to receive the 10 Commandments, after 40 days they thought, oh, he's died up there. Now we're out here all alone. Let's make idols for ourselves and worship them. And it just is so such an indictment on the forefathers of these Jewish people that Stephen is talking to. It's an indictment on them for their and over again, God had referred to the children of Israel as a stiff-necked people, a people that just hard-hearted, and all the things that God had done for them, and yet they continued to stray away from the Lord and return and worship idols. And all throughout their history, that's what God was continually trying to break them of their idolatry. Look at the book of Judges. They would worship idols, and God would send a foreign people to oppress them, whether it be the Philistines, or the Ammonites, or some other group. And they would feel the oppression, and then they would call out to the Lord and say, God, we're sorry, and God would send them a judge to deliver them from that bondage, and they'd have peace for a period of time as long as that judge was alive. And then it says the same cycle would repeat itself. They'd stray away from the Lord, and they'd fall back into idolatry and worshiping the idols of the peoples around them, and God would again oppress them. And we see this cycle over and over and over again. And it's an indictment. It's a sad testimony of what kind of people the nation of Israel was in that time. And so Stephen is again just rehashing the history of the nation of Israel as he defends himself against the accusations that he has blasphemed God and Moses. What do we observe in this passage as far as things that we can take to heart or apply to our own lives? I think one of the things that's important is, again, that the fact that here is Stephen. He's been falsely accused, and yet he's not doing anything to justify himself or try to make himself look good. He's just telling the truth. He's telling the truth. He's not being defensive. He's giving them a history lesson. And the fact of the matter is, they were the ones that were in the wrong, making these false accusations, and they knew that they were in the wrong. And so by him just taking the high ground and just reminding them of the awful history of the nation of Israel, really, that their forefathers and their traditions, they continuously provoked the Lord to wrath and rejected the prophets and ultimately rejected the Messiah and put him to death. So how do we look at this passage and make application for it? Well, I think we can sometimes learn from the lessons of other people's mistakes. And so when we look at the Stephen's recounting of the history of the nation of Israel and the wickedness that they had done, I think it's important to look at our own hearts before we stand in judgment over those people who did those things. We need to make sure that we're not guilty of doing similar things, right? So here was the issue, was how quickly the nation of Israel turned to idols, turned from God to idols. And in our culture, we don't make graven images per se to worship. We don't. That's not who we are as a people. But we do have idols nonetheless. Um, so let's define what is an idol. An idol is anything that we prioritize or honor more than God. That's what an idol is. An idol is something that we honor more than God. And when we think about the things that are important in our life, that's the question that we have to ask. Is there anything more important in my life that I would choose over God or over my relationship with God? And someone has said that the only thing you have to do to determine what somebody prioritizes is look at a couple of things. Number one, how they spend their time, how they use their talents, and how they spend their money. Time, talent, and treasure. Time, talent, and treasure. How do you use those three things in your life? Do you spend an exorbitant amount of time with things that are pursuit of the world, the flesh, or the devil? Worldly things, carnal things, evil things. These are the things that can become idols in our life. And they don't necessarily have to be bad things in and of themselves. You can spend a lot of time I'm trying to think of sports. I see sports as a thing that consumes a lot of time in people's lives, and I have to guard myself in that aspect because I do like to follow sports. But if you spend your whole weekend watching football in the fall, all day Saturday and all day Sunday, that's probably a little bit out of balance. So there's your where you spend your time. What about your how do you use your talents, your abilities? Do you use them to honor and glorify God, or do you use them for something else? What about your treasure? Do you invest in eternal things, in the things of God, in the kingdom of God? Or is your treasure tied up in pursuits of pleasure and just things that are meaningless? Anytime that those three things are out of balance, it may be an indication that you have idols in your life. So examine your life, examine ourselves, and make sure that God is number one. What's the first commandment that God gave us? Thou shalt what? Love the Lord thy God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength. See, God is a jealous God. His name is jealous. And God wants more than anything for us to love him. And it's not that he doesn't deserve it, right? Because, he demonstrated his love toward us, and that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us, Romans 5:8. And so we think about that, and we think about what an insult it would be to God for us to show more love to anything. Is a total insult. So idolatry is kind of the theme that we're looking at here in this passage, and Stephen has pointed out the nature and the idolatry that's been historically a problem with the children of Israel, and he's pointing it out. And the fact is, we have to be careful too, not to allow things to creep into our life that can become idols. So that's my thoughts for today. I know that as we get a little bit further into this sermon that Stephen is preaching, we're going to see how he's bringing everything to a point, and he's confronting the very sin of these people who have falsely accused him. So we'll look at that tomorrow. But I hope you have a blessed day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.